Hey everybody, my name is Matt from Black Genesis, and when I'm not playing music or not doing shows, one of the things I love is like comic book movies, comic book shows, comic books, like actual books, like on paper where you can feel it. Like that's one of my huge passions. I don't know if you knew this, but I'm a massive nerd, and one of the biggest things that I've heard in a long time just came out, just saw it come across my feed just a little bit ago, is that Marvel actually bought the rights to 20th. Marvel actually bought the rights to 20th Century Fox, which means that the X-Men, the X-Men, those people from the movies before X-Men, the X-Men might be coming back to Marvel, like the MCU, like MCU proper. Which is a huge deal because this whole time, that's a huge section of the comics that just weren't a part of the movies at all, and we were always kind of wondering where they were going to be. And as great as Logan was, and as great as Deadpool was, that's about it. I mean, there was a scene in X-Men 2, which was pretty bomb, but where Nightcrawler was like, bam, fin all over the place. That was pretty cool. But other than that, we haven't seen a lot of good X-Men properties from 20th Century Fox. So with it coming into the Marvel fold, maybe they might be able to do something cool with it. We don't know. But I thought it would be fun for me, a guy who's never written a comic book before in his life, and is just some guy who makes music every now and then, to kind of make a video on what I think would be cool for the X-Men coming in to the Marvel Universe. Okay, so this is part one, like the first part, like post-war, like post the war, post-Infinity War. Okay, first thing we need to do is explain why we're setting this all up after Infinity War. And I think that's because it helps us break in the timeline really well. So you'll have the Avengers time, so that's the time of the Avengers, and then you'll have the era of the mutants, which will all happen after that. Multiple reasons for doing this. One, just because I think that it'd be good to split it up. One of the things in the comics, what they tried to address recently, but never really felt organic, to me at least, was how the Avengers could be like heroes, and people wore like Halloween costumes of them, and they loved them, and then the X-Men were like hated and feared, like openly, like really openly. At the same time, the Fantastic Four had a building in the middle of New York City, and they also had like the same kind of weird powers as mutants do. Some of them, like pyrokinesis, like had the same bit. So like to me, it never really made sense. So what I'm doing is setting this all after the Infinity War situation. So I gotta read some of this because it's like a lot. After the events of the Infinity War, you have like alien stuff, magic, a bunch of different cosmic energies racking the Earth. You see it right there. I made it. I made like cosmic energies all around the Earth. So it starts affecting Earth's ecosystem, and it's a very delicate balance. So when you throw a bunch of alien stuff, a bunch of magic, a bunch of cosmic things, maybe from some sort of gauntlet, it might affect what the world does. And one of the things that's on the world, in case you've known that, but you don't know that, is people, humans. So it starts affecting human bodies, human genomes. And one of the things it does is it accelerates the mutant X gene. Now, for those of you who don't know the comics, X gene is what creates mutants. If you have the X gene, then you become a mutant. If you don't have the X gene, you don't become a mutant. It starts accelerating the X gene that is naturally found in human beings. So, before all the events of Infinity War, maybe every 1 in 6 million people would have been a mutant naturally. Meaning about only like 116 mutants were around on the planet before the events of Infinity War. Meaning that people really didn't catch them. You get people with superpowers, they don't know how they got them, and stuff like that. So you get those little rarities, little people that just sort of pop in and out. One of the fun things that we could do with that is, if you remember back in Captain America, the First Avenger, there's a scene in the very, the war scene, in the war flashback, where he is doing his little montage. He's punching Hitler in the face and doing all the fun stuff like that. And in the montage, you see him go to an actual part of the war, like an actual on the front, and the soldiers aren't having it, they're not laughing. And there's a soldier that yells out, "Bring the girls back on!" That soldier could be Logan, meaning Wolverine, from back in the day, because he could be one of those natural born mutants. It's known in the comics that Logan has fought with Captain America in World War II. They didn't know each other at the time. He was like, hey, you're Wolverine. He's like, hey, you're Captain America. Back in that time, he was just a soldier, but it would be cool to kind of tie that in. That way we can say that mutants have been around throughout the entire Avengers time. It's just there were so few of them that it didn't register on any radar. That might also be another reason why S.H.I.E.L.D. has a reason to build what they built in Captain America 2, Winter Soldier. The track down people and kill them because they're different and stuff like that. That would be another good catalyst for that. Like people getting new powers, we don't know who they are, but it's so rare that it very rarely comes up.
So, because of the effect of the planet during Infinity...
Because of the effect on the planet of all the things going on from Infinity Wars, the human population's X gene starts to evolve at a much more rapid rate, start happening faster and faster to more and more people, thus creating the mutant epidemic. This brings us to part 2, which is fear. All over the world, reports are pouring in about adolescents developing crazy powers. Some of them like deform them physically, others are just wild and uncontrollable. Some are actually kind of cool looking, but you still get that general sense of fear. No one knows what's going on. No one knows what's going on to their kids. No one knows what's going on to their neighbors. It's just fear. At any point in time, somebody could just turn into anything, and it's freaking people out. So then you cut to the news sources, and they start using it as talking points. Things like, any day your son or daughter could become the next Hulk. You remember, the planet never liked Hulk. Even though he was a part of the Avengers, he was still a monster. You remember, all you have to do is click back to one of those clips of the Hulk movie, see him rampaging through Harlem, and it doesn't take long for people to use that, as well as in Avengers 2, Age of Ultron, where he was destroying a city and Iron Man had to take him down. Those clips, out of context, which the news would never do in real life, out of context, they would use these clips to scare the American populace against mutants. Politicians could make their whole campaign on fighting against the mutant menace. And you'd obviously have pro-mutant sides and anti-mutant sides. But that's where the beauty of the X-Men comes in, because it reveals that in people. The people of anti-mutants and pro-mutants. You had lock 'em up and mutants' rights. And it would be all over the news all the time. It would be the number one talking point. You might ask, well, what about the Avengers? People like them, right? Well, here's the thing. Most of the Avengers are actually just highly skilled people. You have Hawkeye, highly skilled archer dude. You have Black Widow, spy, human spy. You have Iron Man, ingenuity, made it himself, built it in a cave. Rhodey stole that same suit, and then the American government built it from the ground up, not from the ground up, but built it into the War Machine. A Vision, who is an android, not a mutant. Black Panther, who is, once again, not a mutant, is a king of his own country, and once again, tech. Just super awesome, mega awesome black power tech. Then you have Captain America. Now, Captain America is kind of in that gray area because he's a human, but he was augmented, which is easily turned into, he was augmented by the United States government in a sanctioned experiment to win World War II. Not just some random kid turning into a monster in the middle of a pep rally. Then you have the oddballs, which is Scarlet Witch and Hulk, both of which are responsible for huge amounts of destruction in the Avengers movies already. So it'd be really easy for the public, or if you were a politician, to turn positive praise for the Avengers into negatives about mutants, because the only Avengers that are really safe and can be trusted are the human ones, the human non-mutant Avengers.
The beginning of the conflict of
What comes next is the beginning, the origins of the conflict that rages across the mutant story, which is that of Magneto and Charles Xavier. Okay, one of the things I want to make sure I tell you guys right now is I'm going to be doing something for my interpretation of how the X-Men should come into the MCU called, is it race bending? I think they use in the Avatar slang is race bending. Now, that is when you take a character that is traditionally one race and you change it to have it fit another. One of the things that the X-Men universe did for me as like a black nerd was to highlight differences, to show how sometimes it feels crappy to be different. And there's a lot of different ways that's been used over the time. I know originally it was really used to highlight the struggle of the black community during the civil rights. I know a lot of times now it's used to highlight the LGBTQ community and their fight for equality. And that's one of the beautiful things that the X-Men do, is that they are a champion for those who are different and those who are hated. So in my interpretation in the MCU, because one of the beautiful things about movies and about this new light, this new breath, is to be able to create a characters that might speak to more people that don't have to be the same people from the comics, because it's the MCU universe. So that is going to happen, and it's going to be very specific and also very obvious in some ways. So I hope you just follow along with that as I move forward. So due to the fear of mutants and aliens and just people doing God knows what, God knows when, different countries start adapting to different measures in order to keep their country safe. One of those countries being America. And they do something a little familiar by choosing to lock down certain sections of the country and not help or not allow people to come in or out of the country. Maybe not out, but definitely not in the country. One of these situations we find ourselves is with a young boy and his family. They are fleeing violence in their homeland by trying to come and stay with family in America. A young boy, his mother, and his father. So they come to the airport, and it is filled with soldiers and protesters, some people yelling at them to go home, other people yelling at the people yelling at them to go home, and it's this huge, chaotic, stressful situation. The soldiers are on edge, the people are on edge, the flight staff is on edge, that guy over working at Starbucks on edge, everybody's on edge. And it's a very tense situation. Well, during this time, the young little boy walking with his family is starting to get scared. Obviously, there are people with guns, there are people screaming at him, shouting, spitting in his direction. Everyone's yelling. His mother and father try to hold him close and just tell him it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay, we're going to get through this, we're going to get safe, it's going to be safe, this is a better place. At some point in this time, the little boy starts to manifest his powers. Now, by manifest, he starts to move things, starts to move certain objects. Trash cans, wheelchairs start moving closer to him. There's just a general sense of things start to be coming in his direction. Now, the soldiers pick up on this. They notice this, and they start freaking out. Why? Because they've heard all about the idea of terrorist groups sneaking mutant bomb children into different countries in order to destabilize them, to hurt people. So they start freaking out. Now, mom and dad are trying to explain, hey, this is not what it is. It's okay, everything's okay. Now they're speaking in their language, everyone else is speaking a different language, everyone's yelling, everyone's shouting. The whole situation is starting to build and it's starting to become more and more unstable. The little boy is starting to cry, and things are starting to move. Pens are starting to fly. Paper clips are starting to move. So people are starting to freak out. The other people walking with their families are starting to freak out. And the soldiers are starting pointing their guns. Everyone's freaking out. The mom is being pulled away from the son, and when she runs back to try and calm him down, she is shot by a soldier. Just shot. He got scared, and she dies. The father, grief-stricken and angry, runs forward, and he too is gunned down. It all happens so quickly. People are now screaming and running, and the little boy is standing where his parents have been murdered, their blood running down to his shoes. And he looks up and rages. The whole airport starts to twist and turn, and things start to just fall down, and people are now screaming and running and trying to find a way out. Cut to rescue workers sifting through the rubble, trying to find what happened here. The news says it was an attack, there was a structural damage, everyone's saying everything. One of the rescue workers finds a little boy trapped underneath the rubble. He's crying and broken. So he takes him and he brings him to the hospital. And so he is placed as a John Doe because no one can speak his language. He doesn't have any family around. And eventually he gets put in the system. He gets adopted by a young Jewish family named the Maximoffs. And that's where his story begins. So then we cut to a couple years later. We have a young black Charles Xavier living with his family in upstate New York. At this point in time, mutants are popping up a little bit more frequently as the effects of the X gene acceleration is starting to become more apparent. For those of you who don't know, in the comics, Professor Xavier's father died when he was young and his mother remarried. So this is going to be the same situation in my course of events. Now his mother and him, Charles and his mother, are both black. Now his stepfather, Dr. Kurt Marco, and his step brother, Kane Marco, and for those of you nerds who know what I'm talking about, they are both white. So it has a blended family already in both more ways than one. At this point in time, Charles already knows he's a mutant. That's already come out for him. He's a very powerful telepath. He's already lost all of his hair. The only person that knows in his family is his mother. He has told his mother, but he hasn't told his father or Kane because they are not so positive on the mutant situation. Now, Kurt Marco actually very much loves Charles Xavier, just like in the comics. He loves him because he's a very smart kid. He's a very academically positive kid. I don't know if that's the right phrase. Academically, well, he does well. Academically, you can tell that I didn't. He is he's a straight A student, and he's very well, and he always seems to know exactly what Kurt wants him to do and when he wants him to do it. This makes Kane look even worse than he normally did. Kane is a big jock, not very smart, not very tolerant, and very mean to Charles. Kurt's disdain for his less than ideal son goes so far as screaming and even hitting Kane, which Charles sees and he witnesses along with his mother, and it's just something that happens in their household. This even further drives a rift between Charles and Kane, which will end up playing a bigger part in the X-Men mythos later. But for now, it just causes a lot of family strife. One of the things that Charles does to kind of clear his head, to get his mind off of everything that's going on, is to take runs. He likes to run, he loves to jog, he loves to run laps around the property, but more or less, he just likes to get out and just be. At school, the prep school where Charles and Kane both go, he's not necessarily well liked. A, because he is kind of seemed to be there because his mom married into money. He is one of the only black students there, and this causes a lot of animosity amongst the upper crust kids. So he gets bullied a lot. Charles tries his best to stay out of the limelight, stay out of the radar, but it doesn't always work out for him. So after a particularly bad day of bullying, Charles takes a run and decides to run from his prep school home as opposed to take the car like he would normally do. So during this run, Charles starts just running, and right now he takes off his prep school clothes, he takes off that, he just has his running gear on, which would just be like sweats and a hoodie and some things for his earphones and just to run. So he's just running through this neighborhood where he telepathically encounters a cry for help, whether that be like a dude or a lady. He hears a cry for help in his mind. Someone is hoping that someone is listening because something bad's happening to them. So he starts running through the neighborhood trying to find where this voice is coming from, where this thought in his head is coming from. So eventually he finds his house, and inside the house he hears mentally that someone is in trouble. So as he starts to go towards the house, suddenly you hear whoop 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 whoop. Not Zoidberg from Futurama. That whoop whoop. That's the sound of the police. Whoop whoop. That's the sound of the police. He pulls up to the house and he hears sirens blaring, and there are some police officers. They're wondering what he's doing in that neighborhood. Now Charles is trying to explain to him that there's something going on inside the house, but right now all they see is the young black man in a hoodie trying to break into a stranger's home in a more upper-class neighborhood. Charles keeps trying to explain. The situation starts getting tense as people are starting to shout, and he's trying to explain to them something's going on inside. They're not listening to him. He's not getting down. He's not putting his hands up. He's not laying down. He's trying to explain, and sure enough, when he turns around to once again point to the house, they shoot him. One bullet, straight to the back of the spine.
Hey everyone, this is Matt from Black Genesis again. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. And I know that we might make some more of these videos, but for sure we will be continuing with my take on the X-Men joining the MCU very soon.